Hi, my name is Pat Doherty. We're here now on the Isle of Doagh, which is on the Inishowen Peninsula here in Donegal. Some people would call this place Doagh Island. So we're living out along the coast here. The house behind me, myself, my family, we lived in that one till 1984. And if you to come here in 1984 to this community, and this townland of Doagh, which is called, there was 8 houses, and out of 8 houses, 3 of them had slate roofs, so every house was thatched that time, except for 3 houses, and that was 1984. But things have changed from then on. It's really when Ireland became part of that European common market, had changed Ireland, that took away all the trade barriers, and for the first time allowed a wee small country, a small population, to sell to Europe and across the world. So when we lived in this house, there were 6 of us in it. My parents and 1 brother and 2 sisters had just had a bedroom and a kitchen. And that was in 1984, we were living like that. Well, my background was, we started off farming, and my father was a rabbit trapper. So what he did, he trapped rabbits, and his family exported rabbits to England during the war years, and to Dublin to 1977. So they also buyed the rabbits of other farmers, and they were exporting them and selling them. There was a train that time going round the whole of Ireland. So our train ran from Derry City through Buncrana into the town of Cairngullah. So at the beginning, that's how that opened up a whole new market, and the market at that time was rabbits. Well, this area is different to other parts of Donegal or Inishowen. We're surrounded by the sea, but we don't have a pier. And the reason we don't have a pier, the water that surrounds us is called Trebega Bay, which is a treacherous water, sandbanks, rocks, and strong currents. Across the mouth of the bay, there's a bar of sand. It's known as the bar mouth. So boats would capsize on it. So here, very little fishing done by boat. And the boat was used really to take people to church across the water to Malin. That's what the biggest use of a boat was. So people stayed on the land, and they fished off the land with big long poles like this here. This is the fishing rod. And they start to fish that around August of each year. But 2 weeks before they went fishing, there's a rule among the community. Every house on a different day would take it in their own turn. They go to the place where they fished. It had to be low tide only, with boiled potatoes. They mashed up the potatoes, and they threw the potatoes into the water. And after a few days, the fish got used to being fed. So fish gathered there at that spot every day at low tide, and they waited for you to come and feed them with potatoes. We're surrounded by the sea, yet it only worked in 2 places, and that proves to, it doesn't work everywhere. So the main place is right below where we are here today, is a place called the Nose, and that's one place of fishing. The next place is about a mile or more up the bay, and up the bay things were different. The fish was very far out, but people up there did it different to us. They made up a sling, and they could land the potatoes out a long distance to the fish was, and every time they sent out the potatoes, they shortened the distance, and the fish that's out in the deep water started to follow the potatoes closer to the shore. And when they got the fish close to the shore, have to keep feeding them, they stay about. Now the fish they caught are young pollock. Locally in Inishowen here, we call them pickers. You catch about a bucket of them every day. They stayed only in the bay for the months of August and September. But they caught enough fish in 2 months that kept a family going for the whole winter. And everything that time was salted. So that was just part of life here to the 1980s. They caught the fish like potatoes. So when you caught these wee pickers, as we call them, when you went to gut them, they were full of potatoes. So they really like potatoes. The bait they used on this fishing rod, see, it's just got a line like this here, and then you had a cork, and you dropped it out, and you sat and watched it. And then when the fish goes for the hook. So on the hook, we have 2 shells here locally. One's called winkle, and the other one's called wulk. And the wulk, the locals here would call it dog wulk. So in our local community, anything that had the name dog in front of it, we'd never eat it. It was a warning to us not to touch it. Yet people today's world eats away dog wulks, dog fish, dog crab. And so the wulk has got a white meat inside it. So what they do with it is they go down and they gather maybe a couple of dozen of white wulks, and they put them into like a bean can, and they cover them in sugar, because they said that made them sweet, so the fish would like to eat them. And then they would just scald them. And then they'd crack that shell when they're down fishing, to keep them on the shell when they're down fishing, and they crack it with a stone. And the white meat, they put it on the hook, and it looked like a potato. And then the fish, they went for that bait, you see. And that's it. If you scalded it too much, it would fall off the hook, and there's no use putting boiled potatoes on a hook. It washes off. And the difference between the wulk and the winkle is the winkle has got blacker meat. There's a black line of meat, black colour meat, and the winkle. If you put winkle meat on the hook, fish never went for it. They only went for the wulk because they believed that was potatoes. And that's how they caught the fish. And that continued here too. Well into the 1980s, when we came from school here in the 1980s, nobody talked about playing football those days. The whole trend was when you came from school, everybody had a fishing rod and everybody went fishing. Today, nobody fishes at all. It's all changed. The fish is still there if you, more likely you still would have to feed them for this area and you catch them. But you know, when we were going to school, at that time, you'd look out in the water and you'd be looking out in the water for maybe 90 seconds or so, and a fish would always jump in front of you. Today in this area, I've got sons of my own who have never seen a fish jump. And that's how it's changed. And that time it was all splash, splash, splash. Today, rare to see a fish jump. I thought this was unique to this area. But you know, because we have a visitor centre here, we get people from all over the world who come here. And a family came here from Russia, and they explained to me that they lived along the coast of Russia, and their grandparents always used potatoes for feeding fish, the same as us here. So today, in Britain today, no, feeding fish is called ground beating. In Australia, it's called birdley. And America it's called chumming, feeding fish. So this idea is not just unique to this area. No, it's been used all over the world. In some ways, it's a bit like the carrageen moss now. You know, carrag is an Irish word which means rock, and we'd use as a seaweed that grows on the shore here, and we'd use it especially for people with chest problems and people who are very sick in the hospice. And we call it carrageen moss, but the same seaweed is harvested in Australia, Canada, and they call it Irish moss. And the reason they call it Irish moss, they tell us, is all to do with people leaving Ireland on prison boats for the likes of Australia, or emigrating to places like Canada. And the Irish people went there, settled there, picked this off the rocks and cooked it. The native people seen how good it was, but they found it hard to say the word carrageen, so they called it Irish moss. And that's why it's called Irish moss in different parts of the world today. So, like Australia today, you may have heard of Irish cough mixture, but it's made from carrageen, but yet they call it Irish cough mixture. No, seaweed for fertiliser was a big thing, but no, seaweed only washes ashore out along the Atlantic coast. And when you live up a bay like we live here, very little seaweed will go up the bay. And in the past, you know, the seaweed came ashore out along the coast, and when people heard there was seaweed came ashore, everybody flocked to the beach to get the seaweed, and it caused rows in the community. So that because people were fighting over the seaweed. It was valuable, it was fertiliser. But so to stop people from rowing, they said that the landlords in the past made it a rule that certain days was used for certain townlands to lift the seaweed from the beach. So this area, because it's beside the beach, was given 2 days, and the whole day of a Monday and the half day of a Wednesday to lift seaweed. While further inland then, people were given the other days. So that meant everybody had a chance of getting seaweed. Further up the bay, next Malin, seaweed didn't come ashore. So what people did up there, they grew their own seaweed. And how they grew their own seaweed, when they were working their land and they found a big rock on their land, they made use of that rock. So they made up like a sleigh for buying a horse, and the older people called it a slipe. And they'd roll this rock onto the slipe, and the horse would throw the rock out onto the beach. They planted the rock on the beach, and the seaweed, after a couple of years, would start growing on that rock. So every farm here has his own wee small farm out on the beach for growing their own seaweed. So they're always adapting and they're always finding ways of surviving, because the seaweed was the fertiliser. We live in a small farm. There's very poor land on it, and it's all sand, and this is why people were using it for rabbit trapping, because rabbits thrive in sand. So when I left school, then I worked for a while in Dublin, and there was really no future in farming. And then we'd be travelling around the country, we'd seen the whole countryside, and we noticed that Donegal was just as good a place as any for tourism, but people didn't come here. And that's the problem. people didn't come to Donegal much. One reason was the troubles in Northern Ireland, and the other reason, no, maybe it was badly marketed and people didn't see tourism as a product. The local people didn't see it. So I believed in it. I would chance something, try something different, and I came up with this idea of starting up this village because the thatched house was there, my home house, and which we lived until 1984. So I started off in 1997, and then every year I added different exhibits onto it, and it grew from that. The road's now becoming busy with traffic, but traffic of a different kind, and a lot of it is people farming oysters. So just beside us here, people, the bay further up there, maybe 200 to 300 people at some stage will be working in that bay, farming oysters. So it's become a big business. The tourists, when they come here, they keep asking us, what does them people do out on the water? And that's their question. What are they doing out there? And then you tell them, they're farming. Because most tourists what they want to know, how does that man afford to build that house? That's what they want to know. No, it's not the things that we think that they want to hear. They've come here to learn how the community survives. And they'll be asking, what's he doing out in the water there? And you tell them about the oysters, and then they keep asking, where can you get tasting these oysters? And that gave me the idea then of trying to do something different. And the idea is an oyster bar. And I wanted to be a wee bit different, It's not just tasting oysters and sitting in a corner and tasting oyster. The idea is, we bring in groups of people, and they get tasting oysters, which is the local oyster, and they get wine, and there's music, and it's all to be fun. But it's also trying to get people to realise our local foods, and that local food for this area today is oyster today. Well, we can either sit down and complain, complain about things not happening, or we do it ourselves. So there is a lot of help out there, government-wise and Fáilte Ireland-wise. Just an advice alone, which is, it's not always about money, it's always advice telling you how to go forward like that there. And I think we have to adapt. Every year brings a new change and a new market. The story we tell in the famine village, is not just about the famine, it's about a family, a community surviving from the famine times right up until today. And you learn how people adapt and change their ways of living, trying to do that. So it's like the man carrying the stones out onto the beach, to the people, different ways of fishing, to the people now who are all growing oysters here, which is brand new to this area. Yet back in the 1800s, they farmed oysters here too. So what I'm at here now is just another way of farming. It's another way of trying to make a living. Only this time it's tourism. The same as fishing. You go out in your boat and you hope to catch the fish, but there's no guarantee you'll come in with them. And tourism's similar too. You open up your door in the morning, and you can't tell what's going to come in. To what you've caught until the evening. And so there are a lot of similarities, but it's all survival. And if you want to survive out in a remote place like this here, you have to adapt and have to try different things to survive. And that's what people have been doing for the last hundreds of years out in remote places like this here. So in the past, people would have emigrated. There's very few people emigrating from this area today. The young generation today are all finding ways of coming up with ideas. Should it be an engineering shop or a different way of farming, from with one man here doing snails to the oyster farmer, who's completely different again. But they've all found their own wee niches in the marketplace.